Welcome into Valley News Now. I'm Adam Shalifo, and I am joined by one of our lead journalists over here at Valley News Live, Gabriel Ostler. Gabriel, thank you for joining me on the desk. You have been hot on the heels of a recent story in Crookston. Why don't you just start with the basic synopsis of what has been going on?
Yeah, this is one of those things where, I don't know if this is something that you've said specifically on the desk before, but as journalists, what we get to air is usually a fraction of what's, really reportable. We have to really distill it down and make it so that it's in a condensed and friendly format. But there's very, very much more to the story than often makes it to the airwaves, and that's what's so great about the digital desk, is that we can share more of those things in depth in a longer form setting and really give people who are interested in this stuff a more context and much more backstory.
Yeah.
So what's been generally reported is that there was a gentleman who was staying at a shelter out in Crookston. There was an incident. The police refer to it as a fight, and they arrived there, tried to subdue the man through non-lethal force, and then eventually were forced to shoot him, and then he died on the scene. That's what's been reported. That's still being looked into. We're not saying anything to dispute the official account because we still need the body cam footage and we still need all of the proper information before anybody comes to a reasonable conclusion. But what we do have is our great whistleblower hotline, with people always reaching out to us and trying to give us more information. One of those people was the man, Christopher Ryan Junkin was the victim in this case. His roommate at the Care and Share shelter in Crookston, who was there from the very beginning, reached out to us and agreed to do an interview. And that was a very enlightening, far-reaching conversation where he really walked me through everything that happened that night from his perspective. What he said is that Chris was essentially having a mental health episode. He was not at liberty to disclose what those mental health conditions that might have been, be it schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever, but something in that realm. He
was having an episode, whatever that means specifically for him.
Yes. And he got very agitated. Robert, the roommate, calmed him down at least once, but then, the agitation rose up again. And eventually they engaged in a little bit of wrestling, was the way that Robert put it, but he stressed over and over, this is not a fight. This is not something where he felt like he was in danger, where punches were being thrown, anything like that. It was mostly him just kind of trying to envelop this man and be like, listen, like everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Eventually, Chris did break free and then ended up in another location surrounded by those police officers, and then, the incident escalated from there. But Robert did not call the police. Robert did not want to press charges. He told the officers on the scene, he needs psychiatric help. I don't want you arresting him. I don't want you doing anything bad to him. And so Robert was just very passionate about talking with me and letting me know that, hey, wherever they've painted him, in his mind was not accurate, because he was not being, aggressive to the point of needing lethal force used against him.
And so just to recap the events themselves, at a local homeless shelter, and there's an episode, whatever that may have looked like, seems like there's been a stress by Robert that this wasn't necessarily violent, but he did use the word wrestling. Sounds like he's just trying to contain this guy. And then this is all, Robert's account. So then he went out into the streets, and then what happened with the altercation with the officer, as far as you know?
So basically, at a certain point, Robert and Chris were separated more or less, and Chris went off on his own. The police report characterizes it as being, something of a destructive rampage where he's breaking things within the hospital. Nobody really knows the extent of what that property damage might have been.
So was he taken to a hospital from the
homeless shelter?
Homeless
shelter. Yeah,
breaking things in the shelter.
Yeah, sorry, I meant those terms interchangeably, but yes, yeah. Breaking things within the shelter. And then it basically ended up with him alone, surrounded by what Robert says is roughly about 6 officers, all trying to subdue him. They deployed tasers. They did use pepper spray. Those things were not effective. And at a certain point, they felt like their only option was to then use lethal force. this is, again, body cam footage is going to be huge in this one.
Right.
We have body cam footage from the last officer-involved shooting in Polk County, which is something that we'll touch on in a little bit. But that one involved a man who very visibly had a hatchet and was making extremely threatening motions towards the police.
Yeah, in the body cam footage we've both seen in that situation, that was beyond reasonable doubt a threat of violence.
Absolutely. But this one, again, we don't have it, so this is just something that I'm reporting through my interactions. But Robert told me that Chris was only wearing basketball shorts. He did not have anything on him that could feasibly be considered a weapon. Of course, this is a homeless shelter. Most of our logic would dictate that they're not going to let somebody just have a gun lying around or something like that. So that's another thing that he wanted to sort of call into question is, sure, maybe your tasers aren't working because of how much adrenaline is going through his body, this maybe moment of psychosis that is making him immune to this stuff, but what is he really going to do to you that makes
unarmed.
that makes it so that your life is in danger, especially if there's multiple people. He was saying, tackle the guy, have 4 of you sit on him. If you've got 4 officers who can physically put body weight, that has to do something. So those were some of the concerns that he raised in speaking with me. But again, we need the body cam footage before any of us can make any definitive determinations.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, even at this point, like, this is just someone's. I guess I don't want to use the word version, but for lack of a better term, because it's just one of those things where we don't know for sure.
Right.
We don't know for sure what happened. We have the reports and we have the incident reported back from Robert, his roommate. But until we actually see the video and see it for ourselves, then it is all, a lot of information yet to be determined, yet to be seen.
And to be clear, Robert was there at the beginning. He was in the room with him. He was there for the start, and then he did have interactions with the police, but he certainly wasn't watching when the shots were fired or anything like that. That is just between police and Chris. So the way that things ultimately transpired, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
But these are just some more details that were provided as, painting the broader picture of the incident so that it's not just whittled down to guy makes a disturbance and gets shot. There's more to it
There's
than that.
always more to it than that.
Yeah.
Now, it is interesting because this situation, this is something that's happened recently, not this exact thing, but there have been situations in Crookston recently.
Yeah. This is something that, viewers are going to notice and pick up on, and something that we've put out in our reporting as well. It's the 3rd officer-involved shooting in Polk County since the start of the year, which Polk County is not a large place. Crookston is a little over 7,000 people. It's a rural area. So the idea that you would have 3 uses of deadly force within a calendar year, and we're barely in July, it raises questions. Not pointing any fingers in any direction, but it definitely sets off some alarm bells where you're like, oh, okay.
This doesn't seem to be it's not like we're living in a place like Chicago with this millions and millions of people. If it's literally just 7,000 people, that's a bit of a dent to the population.
Yeah, it does not seem proportionate.
No.
And then the thing that has been reported, and again, we need body cam. We're not passing, any judgment on anybody. But the last officer-involved shooting was with the man that we discussed, obviously a threat, wielding a machete. That was back on May 16th. That officer, Nick Fladland, is also the officer named as the shooter in this new case. And I think that much to be learned and discussed, but I think something that would come to mind for a lot of people as any sort of reasonable or charitable interpretation is that's an awfully quick turnaround for someone to be back on the street.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we're really trying to hammer from a reporting angle, is reaching out to the BCA and to the Polk County Sheriff's Office and essentially be like, what's your protocol? When you have an officer that goes through a sincerely traumatic event as shooting somebody, what do they need to go through in order to get back on the street? What sort of mental, competency checks, therapy, like counseling sessions.
Whatever it may be.
Just anything.
Yeah. What is the protocol?
Yeah, how do you determine that this person is now able to go ahead and fulfill their duties to the best of their ability?
Returning to the service.
Yeah. So, and they said before that just as in this most recent release from the BCA that he is now on investigative leave, just standard operating procedure while they find out more and get to the bottom of this. But yeah, it was very jarring for a lot of us in the newsroom, especially, to be like, wait, I know that name, and then you just you feel for somebody as a human being to wonder, how is it possible for you to do your job when you're still processing so many of those emotions from what might have transpired before?
Yeah, not very long ago at all. And we are still, I know, well, you specifically, you are on the track here and trying to gather information. I know you haven't gathered as much as you'd like at this point, but who have you reached out to? What's your process been going like as far as you look to learn more about the situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many different things where, obviously, I already spoke about the roommate. Then there's the administrative, legal, law enforcement side of things where we're still trying to dig into it, but also just learning more about who this man was as a person, because again, as we already stated, it's more than just this man caused a disturbance and now he's gone. There is nobody that is not missed by somebody when they pass away.
Right.
There's no such thing as a less dead individual. Everybody's death touches somebody in some way. And we found out about that very quickly when one of his family members reached out to us. And then we got in contact with them, and we found out that Chris is originally from California. His family's back in Ventura, which is Southern California. I'm not going to get too deep in the California geography weeds there. But he, according to his nephew, who spoke very glowingly about Chris, he came out to the Minnesota area for a relationship. That was kind of what brought him away from his traditional hometown, and had encountered some struggles in his life, and nobody was sugarcoating that, by the way. If anybody's like, oh, well, he was involved in this, involved in that, everyone is upfront about that. Everyone says, yes, Chris had some rough patches. He wasn't a perfect person. But they also talk a lot about how he was very actively trying to turn his life around, how he was enrolled in psychology courses, trying to achieve higher degrees of accreditation as far as his education, and had gone through lots of mental health counseling and therapy work, and was really trying to get a control of his life.
I mean, like, to put it in layman's terms, he was trying to get it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, just to hear the true pain emanating from his nephew, who not only has lost his uncle, someone who's very close to, he spoke of him very much like a father figure and somebody who had been present through him throughout his childhood, but now, this is a deceased individual all the way across the country. And so if you see the GoFundMe page on our website, that is not just for, the family needs money because their relative died. They need money so that they can get his remains back to California, so that they can inter him with the rest of the family and get him to what they consider to be a proper final resting place.
Right.
And they don't have the resources to do that right now. So, as much as we always have sympathy for our law enforcement officers and know that there are multiple facets to the story, I feel like there is definitely a chance for people to forget that this is a human being who had his flaws, but was also very loved and very missed, and his absence has created a very significant hole in another family who is now trying to pick up the pieces from all of that.
Yeah, it's hard to cover these things. It really is. It's hard to cover these things because, it's easy on the outside looking in, frankly, to be critical of, like, well, where's this information? Where's this information? Well, that's what we're working on getting.
Yeah.
And when there are situations like this, sometimes, not sometimes, every time, that information is hard to get on the front end, and it kind of trickles out. And so, we appreciate you, staying on top of this as you look to learn more. Have you heard anything from the law enforcement side on this yet?
Well, and this is another thing that covering these things and being out there. I know that you are doing lots of interviews and trying to conduct various sort of investigative things as it pertains to even the city of Fargo. People are naturally a little bit wary because they fear that they're going to be put in like a gotcha situation, or that, we're really trying to get an angle on them or do something like that. We're not.
No.
We need to know more so that people can, all we want to do is provide the viewers with as much information as possible so they can make their own enlightened decisions on whatever the situation may be.
Yeah.
And so, we know across the country, police departments are horribly understaffed.
Yeah.
Everywhere
Yeah.
is having trouble filling these positions. Everyone's having trouble getting people trained properly and getting them out there in time. So when we mention something like, this guy was just on administrative leave and now he's back, we don't know what's going on with the Crookston Police Department and their numbers. And they could easily be struggling badly for manpower. They feel forced to get somebody back out on the street maybe before they're ready. That's a very tough position for them to be in.
Yeah.
But as far as the information gathering goes, we have feelers out to both the BCA and the Polk County Sheriff's Office, specifically the BCA because we want to talk about that stuff that we touched on earlier about what is the process for clearing these officers to get them back to active duty.
Right.
Because we just want to know what the checkpoints are and what you have to pass in order to make sure that
the
that
logistics
happen.
for situations like that.
And Polk County, there was a sheriff on the scene. This is also, they're listed in the BCA as one of the officers who applied some sort of force, not the deadly force, but some sort of force. And as I mentioned, Polk County has been the location for these things, so that's another thing. I want to say this just in case anybody sees this. I want to say this as non-judgmentally as possible because I really just want to get information. I have been unable to reach the Crookston Police Department, and specifically I'm curious as to what's going on because the phone numbers they have listed online, the calls do not go through for me. And that is for the police department, that is for City Hall, that is for administration, that's for Parks and Rec. So I don't know if they're just having difficulties as a city right now, or if they're in some sort of technical glitch mode, whatever. I've emailed them, Facebook message, Crookston, if you guys are somehow watching this, we just want to know what's going on, and we just want to be able to establish some sort of line of contact so that you guys can speak for yourselves, and we're not, some sort of mouthpiece for you that has to fill in these gaps. We just want to give everybody an equal platform and a chance to share their side of the story.
Absolutely.
So we're reaching out to all the law enforcement agencies to see what sort of details we can get on what would have led up to this and the various administrative processes that officers have to go through in order to get back in these situations.
Oh, I know you have a lot more work to get to today. I don't want to hold you from that. Is there anything else you'd like to add or touch on before we let you go?
Not particularly. It's just one of those things, as I mentioned in the beginning, that there's just so much more to it than I could have told yesterday and even the 2 minutes and 20 seconds that I had. So I hope that people enjoyed the additional context, and just to know to really check in on Valley News now and stick around for these sorts of things, because we have lots of really interesting content that doesn't necessarily have the time to fit into our traditional broadcasts.
I appreciate that, Gabe. Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck as you continue to investigate, gather more information, and provide that information for our viewers. For now, that's all the time we have on Valley News. Now, we will catch you next time.